This is the new SEC.
Thank you for joining us. This is the new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr. Got Hunter Zeisman here. This is our Week 9 preview episode. We have another good week of football coming up here. So many great games. Hunter, what are the thoughts?
And good week of football ahead. SEC, I think once again, maybe carrying the heavy load for the country. We got some good games though around. I don't want to you give me a hard time every week because I talk down on every other conference, but there are some good games in other conferences. So we got an exciting week though.
Yeah, we got a really exciting week, and yeah, I'm going to give you a little junk, right? This is an SEC podcast, the new SEC podcast. Maybe one day we'll have the new ACC podcast and the new Big 12 podcast. But right now, this is the new SEC podcast, and this week we have some really good football, not just in the SEC but around the country. And so, everyone that has stayed tuned into this episode, we're going to go around the country, talk about all the top games of Week 9. What these games mean in terms of the playoffs potentially, the different teams in the AP Top 25, and then we're going to go through our games this week in the SEC. Another great slate. We got 5 games this week, if I'm not mistaken, or 6 actually.
6, yeah,
6 this week. A lot to prove for some teams coming off of last week for sure. When you think about around the country, what are some games that you're interested in when it comes to like the ACC or the Big 12? Big 10.
The Big 12, I think, has maybe the best game of the week from what could impact the playoff to, outside of the SEC ones that we're going to talk more in depth about. And that's BYU at UCF. UCF favored at home over number 11 BYU. They're undefeated, going down to Florida. That one, if UCF can topple BYU, that would be a huge one for the way the playoff shakes out. And never a good sign if you're BYU being dogs, to an unranked team.
Yeah, never a good sign there. We saw what UCF was able to do last week against Iowa State. The 2 highest ranked teams in the conference of the Big 12 had to muster up a last game-winning drive to win their games. And so, yeah, going. It's in Orlando, right? So going to Orlando is definitely a big swing when it comes to having UCF favored, and BYU could certainly be an upset watch. I think for lucky for them last week, a lot of people probably weren't up too late watching them to see kind of how that game went down. In the Big 12 for me, I think a game that's interesting is Cincinnati versus Colorado. Cincinnati's 5th in the Big 12. Colorado's number 6 in the Big 12, but the standings are all within a game apart. So that conference, that auto bid's still in place, and this game is pretty big for Colorado to stay in contention, and for Cincinnati to stay in contention. A team that people weren't really talking about. So that's another interesting game for me when I look at the Big 12.
Yeah. And talking upset watch, Navy, Notre Dame. Notre Dame 2-score favorites, but Navy's for real this year. We've seen Notre Dame, and I think at this point, people talked about what team has the worst loss. I think Notre Dame still has the worst loss, especially out of all the ranked teams. And if any team can beat them right now, I think with their weak schedule, it would be Navy right now.
Yeah, I mean, for them, I guess if you're Navy, this could be a great win. I think that would pretty much punch your ticket if you can win out for the rest of the season. That would put you, I think, at 2 ranked wins because you probably would beat Army. You'd beat Notre Dame, but this is a pretty tough opponent. It's going to be taking place in Giant Stadium, East Rutherford, New Jersey, and so it'll be a fun one for sure. Another game I'm looking at, SMU versus Duke. I don't know why I have like a soft spot for former AAC teams. I'm a Houston alum. Obviously SMU used to be in the AAC, and now they're in the ACC. So Duke is, I think they have 1 or 2 losses. SMU's a pretty large favorite there, but that could be a game where SMU continues to stay in the rankings and is still kind of in that playoff race.
Yeah, definitely. Duke is looking good. SMU is looking good. It would be big for SMU to pick up a win here because they are, undefeated in ACC play. Big 10. This is not financial advice, but I think lock of the week, I like Syracuse +6 versus number 19 Pitt. Upset, but I think Syracuse's look strong, behind Kyle McCord, and I think that they could take down Pitt. So that's one that I'm going to be riding on for sure.
Yeah, I would say Pitt is definitely an upset watch. I think they're good. I think Syracuse is really solid too. We saw them take down UNLV this year. They've played a couple close games. Kyle McCord is quietly one of the top quarterbacks in the country at Syracuse. I would never thought he was that bad at Ohio State, and I think it's more impressive what he's doing at Syracuse given the prestige of the program. And so I think they could definitely take down Pitt. So Hunter's betting advice, use with caution, but it is there. And so that'll be a good one. We got Miami's taking Florida State. The Florida State stinkers of the week continue potentially. What are you thinking from Cam? Heisman Cam Ward.
Another weak competition game from Miami. I mean, they can only play the guy in front of them. Florida State, they had no idea they would be this bad this year, but I think Miami takes care of business with ease. Another good game from Cam Ward. He is good. He is a good quarterback. I know I've been a hater all year, but I think that they take this one pretty handedly.
I think this one's pretty convincingly. I mean, if it's not, then we got some real red flags, right? Like Miami's defenses look suspect. This offenses look like one of the best in the country. I think in the Big Ten, we got Illinois versus Oregon. So ranked on ranked matchup, probably one of the top games of the week. The spread doesn't say that, but it's a big game.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Oregon look less than stellar against even worse competition. I think that Illinois could cover the spread. Oregon looking strong now at this point in the season. But if for whatever reason they catch an Oregon of the beginning of the season, Illinois could cover. I don't know if Illinois has what they need to do to win this game. Similar thing for Ohio State and Nebraska. Nebraska coming off of getting absolutely worked last week and then going to Columbus. So it should be another easy one for Ohio State too.
It's been a story of 2 months for Nebraska, right? You start the season off super strong. You put belt to ass against Colorado, and then October's been pretty rough to you. And they got Ohio State coming in, and so Big Ten football, interesting. Not a lot of these games are ever close, but you got Washington playing Indiana. I'm loving Indiana. I mean, they're 13 in the nation. They're dominating. That should be interesting. College game days going there. They can't go to the same school twice, so they've already gone to A&M. The Navy versus Notre Dame game is at a neutral site, so they don't normally go to neutral site games. So I guess they had to go to the Big Ten game this week.
Yeah, they could have been at A&M 3 times this year at this point. Like they really could have. So maybe they just need to, buckle up and do it because A&M right now is playing good football enough to warrant it.
It's playing great football, and we look, we have a lot of love for the A&M fans here and all the fans across the SEC, and so A&M's been showing us a lot of love. In the G5, you touched on it earlier with Navy. It's a big game. Army's on a bye this week. In the Mountain West, we got an interesting one Friday night. UNLV is playing Boise State. I think this is big for Ashton Genty's Heisman resume. It's big for Boise State's G5 potential playoff spot resume. UNLV would love to play spoiler for their season and also, probably put themselves back in the driver's seat for the G5 spot too. So
yeah, early on, these were the two teams that were the ones that were kind of fighting for it at the time. Then you have UNLV taking that loss, Boise State taking the lead control for it. I think I like Boise State here. I think that with what Ashton Genty's been doing, they'll take this one.
Yeah, I feel like I should have did this segment standing fully straight up because that's how Ashton Genty runs. And two sleeper teams. I love the around the country segment, just talking through the different teams and what it means for the playoffs. Yeah. But two teams from the G5, Tulane and Memphis, they're also kind of still in it from the American behind Army Navy. Both teams 5-2, 6-1. Tulane's 3-0 in conference. So that could be those two teams are in action. And then right now we're filming this Wednesday night. So Liberty's playing Kennesaw State, very close to where I'm at in Atlanta, actually. Liberty's 6-0.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Liberty's doing good. Liberty's doing their thing.
Their biggest win is Eastern Carolina. So I think the challenge for them is going to be that strength of schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that they'll have that. I mean, last year they were that team that was sitting at what would have been the G5 spot. So this year, I don't think that they're in the running for it with what the teams ahead of them are showing.
With what the teams are ahead, it's going to be hard to pick against the service academies that have to play each other and picking against a G5 team with a Heisman candidate first time in a while. So that's kind of wraps up the around the country. Which games would you say you're most interested in besides the BYU UCF game? If you had to pick one.
If I'm looking outside the SEC, inside the SEC, it's LSU and A&M, and then I think Texas and Vanderbilt. Outside that, Notre Dame and Navy. I think that Notre Dame is on fraud watch for me. I mean, they have a pretty bad loss to be still sitting there at number 12. Yep. I would love to see Navy, ruin their season because I think while there's 2-loss teams that can make the playoffs, I don't think that a 2-loss Notre Dame team right now would be one of those.
I agree with that. It'd be really interesting to see what the committee does whenever those rankings start with the potential 2-loss Notre Dame. Right, if they get to that point, where does the committee rank them? I feel like Are they really high? Are they low? Like, are they above teams like Kansas State, who only have one loss, in conference, and teams like Indiana, they're sitting there undefeated. Like, it'd be really intriguing to see where they put them.
Yeah, I don't think they should be ranked if they lose this game, to be honest. Like the win over Texas A&M would be what's carrying them, and that was the first game of the season. I know it matters, but with
Right.
probably the worst loss of a ranked team, I think there's other teams that maybe deserve it more. Colorado,
Yeah,
deserves to
definitely
be in there.
Colorado could definitely make the case there. So, I mean, for me in the SEC, LSU, A&M, definitely the most interesting. Alabama, Missouri, potentially. Alabama's on their last strike. Missouri can, have a game where my boy Luther Burden might spin. We'll see, right? But then outside of the SEC, I mean, I guess I'll say Indiana, Washington, or Illinois, Oregon. Illinois,
Yeah.
Oregon, probably the most interesting one. Like, is Illinois legit? How legit is Oregon? I think Oregon's playing great football right now. So, I mean, if they come in, win by 21-28, like, I'll be really impressed.
Yeah, same.
But that wraps up around the country. So we're gonna hop into our game previews. First game we're gonna preview here is Arkansas versus Mississippi State. A really interesting game. Does Arkansas bounce back and win, or does Mississippi State finally get their first win?
Yeah. Arkansas right now, 6.5-point favorites. Before we get into it, we're doing a game promo of the week. So if you're subscribed, subscribe and drop down in the comments your score prediction for this game. Whoever gets the score right gets a new SEC podcast beanie. If multiple people get it right, we're going to, pick a winner at random. But we want to see what you guys think. Stick around because we're going to do our predictions for this game as well. So a chance to win a beanie by subscribing and dropping your score down below. But yeah, with this one, I think Arkansas gets a bounce back, game here. Poor performance versus LSU last week. I like Mississippi State though as well. I think Arkansas could be on upset watch because of Jaquin Jackson being out. We know what a critical player he's been for them this year. Braylon Russell now has to be that guy for them. So it could be an interesting look from the Arkansas offense, which didn't fire full speed last week.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of the story of the week last week for Arkansas. Like their defense, to me, didn't play unimpressive. I think it was just more they were on the field a lot. That's a huge kind of miss or loss for them. On the other side, Mississippi State, all things considered, I mean, they look like they've been playing winning football the past couple of weeks. Michael Van Buren stacked up their true freshman quarterback, stacked up 6 touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. And so I think that could be tough on this Arkansas defense that's looked shaky up and down the past couple of weeks. So what do you think about the Michael Van Buren's impact against a team like Arkansas?
I think from what he's been able to do, and it's been an unwavering confidence at keeping his team in games. You mentioned they've been playing winning football. They've been keeping themselves in games that maybe were getting away from them. And that's what Arkansas, I think, doesn't need this week to happen. Because if we get down the stretch of this game and Arkansas is in a close one versus Mississippi State, they're on the road, Arkansas is. We've seen them make some turnovers in critical points of games. You don't want a Mississippi State team to be rallying for their first SEC win against you at home. So no. I think that what Van Buren's been able to do at keeping his team in games could help, if this is a close game down the stretch, because he does have that extra push, on those late drives that just maybe haven't gone his way, like against Georgia and in past weeks.
Absolutely. And so it'll definitely be interesting to see. I think that for Arkansas, this will be another good quarterback they're facing, right? Obviously, prior to that, they played against Tennessee, and we talked about Tennessee's quarterback challenges. And so all things considered, going off the football we've seen, like, you have to believe that, Michael Van Buren has the abilities to play, but I feel like we tell this story so much. And then by that third game, it's like you got footage on him, makes it a little bit easier to stop, right? The rushing game still has some areas to improve with Johnny Fields, if I'm not mistaken. And so it should be an interesting one. Mississippi State's defense, what do you feel like Arkansas can do against that, given the liability it has been this season?
Yeah, and I think where Mississippi State's defense had struggled the most is in stopping the run, which is what Arkansas really wanted to exploit. And now they don't have probably their best offensive player to do that. So they are going to have to attack in the air. I think Braylon Russell will do just fine running the ball. I think Arkansas will score points. I think that they'll score a lot of points. Maybe not a lot, like they're not going to go up 40, but I think that they will be able to score. I think that Mississippi State, though, on the other hand, will be able to keep up and score some points as well. You mentioned Johnny Daniels, the little committee running back system that they have there at Mississippi State has been picking up. Arkansas's defense has been good against the run at times, kind of middle of the pack, but they let Caden Durham have a day. last week. So there is opportunity for Mississippi State to run the ball against this Arkansas team, make things easier for Van Buren, who's only increasing his connection with, Kevin Coleman Jr. and the rest of the receiving core.
Exactly. And so it's this Arkansas team. It's so hard to predict, right? You play A&M to a 4-point game. You beat Tennessee.
Yeah.
Your offense doesn't show up against LSU. It's like, which Arkansas team's going to show up? Like, because at least for them, the last game was the only game that was like a blowout, right?
Mhm.
Everything's been close, but it's just like, can we see it all put together this game? Is the offense going to match the defense? And is that going to work together to be able to take down a team like Mississippi State? Or is Mississippi State, like, I think it's hard to underestimate a team hungry for a win. This team has probably heard the comments. They've heard some of the disrespect. They've had a taste of putting up points against Georgia, putting on points last week. I think they've looked significantly better than since they played Florida, one of their first SEC games. And so it's hard to count them out, especially in Starksville.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is hard to count them out right now because of that home field advantage. And I think, a key for me in this game for Arkansas is don't make things harder for your defense. We saw the turnovers last week against LSU, the interception from Taylor Green that changed the momentum a little bit when it was 16-10. You don't want to put your defense in harder spots against a Mississippi State team that, for all intents and purposes, is one of the lesser talented opponents. Like, you don't want to give them easy points.
Right.
So, if your Arkansas controlled turnovers, you mentioned what Arkansas team we're going to get. I think that the worst side of the Arkansas teams that we see is ones that have sloppy turnovers.
Yep.
And in this game, Mississippi State's defense is not super stingy. They got some turnovers against Georgia, but I don't think they're going to be super stingy. So if you're Arkansas, play some conservative ball, let your, backup running back get some good carries, some ball security would be great. For Mississippi State, on the other hand, if you can get your running back committee going, you got a lot of guys back there that can keep some legs moving. Use them, because we saw it work last week.
I think those are all great keys. And so in this game, the line it's 58.5 for the over under, 6.5 Arkansas's favored. This Mississippi State defense is bottom in the conference for points given up, 33.5 a game. It's improved, but they're still giving up about 28 points or more the last couple of games. And so I like Arkansas in this one. I mean, I like them 35-28. I think that Michael Van Buren continues to cook. He's been looking really good. And I think Arkansas finds a way to win this. Like you said, I agree with you. The keys for them is don't give Mississippi State the ball, on the 40, on the 30. Don't have those moments in the game where you're just like, why'd you guys do that? Right.
Yeah.
So that's my score. I have Arkansas covering.
Okay. I got Arkansas winning the game 27-24. I got Mississippi State covering on some late drives. I think Arkansas goes up. Mississippi State surges back like we've seen in last week's. Arkansas 27, Mississippi State 24. I think it's going to be a good game.
I think so too.
So let us know what you guys think in the comments if you're listening. Like we said at the beginning, if you get the score right and you're subscribed to the channel, you have the chance to win a new SEC podcast beanie. So let us know what you think.
Oh yeah, 2 steps, right? Subscribe, give us your score prediction on the bottom, and we'll pick the winner based upon who gets the score right. So the next game we're looking at is, I would say, the new SEC podcast game of the week. I think it's a game of the week across the nation. I almost should call it SEC bias here, but 8 LSU versus 14 Texas A&M. The line for this game is A&M 2.5 point favorites. Over under is 53.5.
Yeah. It's a big test for both teams. I think, right now, we mentioned it in our last episode, they're both kind of up there for first in the SEC. They haven't lost an SEC game yet. Whoever wins this game is really poised to make that SEC championship game and is really sitting in a good position to make the playoffs in general. LSU has some tough games ahead. They play Alabama. A&M has Texas at the end of the season. But winning this one is such a huge resume booster. But you have a tale of two different teams. Yeah. LSU, such a pass-heavy team. Nussmeier right now 3rd in the country on passing attempts. They love to pass the ball. A&M, on the other hand, would love it if the whole game just stayed on the ground from both sides. Yep. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out from the two different types of play style.
It'll definitely be really interesting. I was listening to the hard count with JD Pickell. So if you listen to our show, I'm sure you listen to stuff on 3 and Crane and Co. and some of these other publications out there. And I think he compared A&M's offense to barbecue. You go to a barbecue place and The rushing game is their brisket, right? That's their bread and butter. That's what they do best. And I'm not going to take his full analogy. And then I think he compared the passing game to kind of like mac and cheese. It's a solid complimentary, but it's nothing without the brisket. And so for A&M, the stories from the rushing game, Le'Veon Moss second in the SEC in running, yards wise. He's top 5 in touchdowns, and he's been absolutely dominant. Great football name. I mean, Le'Veon Moss, doesn't get any better than that. And so LSU's defense has looked improved, but they're still kind of bottom 5 in the conference. That's a wide range. And so this game, it'll be interesting to see what they can do against one of the best running backs they've faced this season, I would say, for LSU. So
what you mentioned on the rushing, I want to touch on that really quick.
Yes.
They do have a great rushing attack, but LSU right now is such a great rushing defense that it would be interesting to see if they can do both sides. I think that they're going to have Connor Wegman pass the ball because of what we saw from the rush defense at LSU last week against Arkansas, Ole Miss, like holding both teams below 100. I mean, they held Arkansas to basically nothing because Jaquindon Jackson was injured in that game. I think that the LSU defense, while struggling at the beginning, is starting to find their footing. Good linebacker play we mentioned in the last episode. The DBs are getting better. I think that the LSU defense as a whole is a better defense than what we saw at the beginning of the season. But they have been in some shootouts.
Yeah. They have been in some shootouts, but I think that the difference we've seen from this LSU defense is that they've been able to make key stops when they need it, right? We saw it against Ole Miss. We saw it in the game, not necessarily needed last week, but just forcing more turnovers, making key stops. And so it's gone from this defense is a liability per se to it's more bend, don't break. It's not going to force you to lose the game. It's not going to win you the game. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that the good thing for them is that I still think the jury's out on Connor Wegman. I think he's been playing good. I think he's been more of a game manager of late. He's not losing you the game. It kind of backs that same analogy. Some could say he does better just kind of throwing on the run versus, in the pocket. And so it'll be interesting to me. And one of the big keys, it sounds cliche, it's just like, is Connor Wegman going to show up to win you the game, or is he just going to be there? Like I think you had talked about it. We haven't had to see him win you the game, and I'll give you that.
Yeah, that was when I was thinking about this game, and I was thinking about my score prediction and what I think it's going to be. We've seen LSU against Ole Miss, for example, like go all the way to the end, not leading the game, but having some game-winning drives and being able to fight through that adversity. Not saying that Connor Wegman isn't built for that, but we haven't seen it from A&M yet this year where they've won a close game. They're going to be at home here. They played at home, against Notre Dame, so it doesn't say much. But we haven't seen them be built for a shootout. I don't know.
They haven't needed to.
They haven't needed to. So you only play the team in front of you. But from Wegman, having that hiatus when Marcel Reed came in and played, I don't know yet how he's going to perform in the bright lights, 7:30 at night. If it is a game that goes back and forth down the stretch. Whereas we know what Nussmeier is going to do. He stepped up in the pocket many times, delivered passes, Kyron Lacey in tight windows downfield, like against Ole Miss. And I'm not saying that A&M doesn't have that. We haven't seen it. So I feel more confident in saying that LSU is built for that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And why I like LSU more in this game, this is not a definitive pick yet, is we talked about, the quarterback play from Nussmeier. Threw the ball over 50 times last game. I mean, they're letting him sling it, right? It's this offensive line. It's been the story of the season. Will Shepherd is a top 10 projected pick. I think I'm pretty sure Nussmeier is never under pressure. This offensive line is one of the best in the country. I'm not just saying that. There are stats to back that up. Right now A&M's passing defense is around 50th in the country. So they do a good job, but I don't know if they're going to have the ability to create that same pressure on him, even with Nick Scorton, to disrupt plays for Garrett Nussmeier in this game.
Yeah, and that's what set them aside in the Missouri game is that, they had 6 sacks in that game. They were getting to him consistently. That's not going to happen here. Yeah. LSU, they've given up 2 sacks on the year, and it was mostly from players who weren't starting. They gave up some to South Carolina. They've been solid all around, like LSU's offensive line. And the worst pairing, I think, for A&M in this game is LSU having a good O-line and the A&M DBs being maybe the weakest part of their defense right now. Yeah. Their first 2 backs, I hate to call them out, Des Ricks, Jaden Hill, they've given up over 500 just between the 2 of them this year so far. they're not you're not the worst cornerbacks, but
Right.
if you have a guy who's able to sit in the pocket, let his receivers run more extended routes, it's not a fun recipe for cornerbacks on the day when you're chasing around and you're not expecting, quarterback pressure. So that's where I
Especially
think
when you got Kyron Lacey coming in there.
Aaron
He's ready.
Anderson,
He's ready to hit. He's ready to hit that Sally on you.
Yeah, I think Kyron Lacey could have a day here. I think Aaron Anderson could have a day here. I think that Nussmeier is going to deliver a ton of passes. Like I mentioned at the beginning, they're pass heavy team. 63% of their plays are passing. They're gonna throw the ball. I like LSU. I think they're too strong right now. Key to the game for them is you have some upcoming freshman talent right now in Caden Durham. Let him run, expand your playbook. It's going to be easy to throw the ball. Like it's going to be easy to settle into that. Caden Durham, he's heating up. Let him continue to heat and get him going early in this game.
Absolutely. And I came into this getting ready to pick A&M, and I just going off of all of the things that I took into account when I prepped for this episode, and I just believe in Garrett Nussmeier more than Connor Wegman. Like I part of me is thinking back to what A&M did against Brady Cook and against that Missouri team. He talked about the DB play. They locked up Theo Weiss and Burden for the most part, especially Burden, right? So it's like you see it outside of the stats you talked about for the DBs for A&M, but I am way more confident in Garrett Nussmeier getting his team in the position to score than I am with Wegman. I think Wegman's very solid. I just haven't seen him have to play behind yet, and maybe he won't have to this game, right?
Yeah.
If people want to make me eat my words, it's fine. But I like LSU in this game. I like them at 28-14. I think it'll be close. I think it's respectable, but for some reason, I feel like right now LSU's rolling. They've both won 6 straight. They both dropped their first game. They've won 5 or 6 straight, and so it's a similar story arc. Nuss has been cooking, so I think he's gonna keep cooking in this one.
Yeah, I like LSU too. A&M are favorites in this game, 2.5, mostly just because they're at home. I think both teams are evenly matched. I like LSU 30-24. I mentioned LSU too strong from a pass pro standpoint. There's time to connect. Unless A&M can get Le'Veon Moss going early, he's great outside the tackles. Let him get out there and maybe break out some runs. Aside from that, I could see some trouble keeping up. I think that the game will be close, but I think they'll have trouble keeping up. Texas is now the second team going to Nashville after playing Georgia. Texas losing to Georgia last week. Vanderbilt up and coming. They're now in the ranks. Texas is going in as big favorites against Vanderbilt. I don't know if it's necessarily warranted, 18.5-point favorites because of what Diego Pavia has been doing. But how do you feel that Texas's energy is coming into a game like this, off of a loss against Georgia?
Yeah, I feel like Texas's energy, if I had to imagine, coming off the loss to Georgia and going into Nashville, where this is not your normal Vanderbilt, it's confident, but it's a little bit worried. And my question was, how worried should Texas be against Vanderbilt? I think if they were able to play, we'll say Kentucky after playing Georgia last week, I think you're worried about Kentucky, but I don't think you have that same worry as Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt kind of has the mystique of, okay, if we blow them out, it's Vanderbilt. If we let them get a lead and kind of get momentum, we're back in this spot where all the eyes are on Texas and we're on upset watch. And people will be flipping to the SEC network to see what's going on. Once again, similar to the Alabama game. So if I'm Texas, I feel confident. I mean, we're still top 5. It's not a game to mess around. I think you follow the program, you follow the playbook to a T. But that's how I'd feel if I was Texas. What do you think?
Yeah, I would feel similarly. Like I think that Texas will win this game. I'll preface it by saying that, but had they played the game better last week, I don't mean from a score perspective, had they looked better in the game. Because if you watch the beginning of that Texas Georgia game last week, they were really struggling on offense, so much so that they switched quarterbacks just to, maybe reset something. They're at home. There's not that noise coming in from the crowd that's messing with you. Right now, Vanderbilt, even though the stadium looks like a Call of Duty map, under construction or something, like it's a tough place to play. Virginia Tech, Alabama, like teams are losing there. I mean, Vanderbilt's a few plays away from being 7-0 right now. Like, in all honesty, they're not, but they have the ability to do it. And I think that they have something offensively that could give Texas trouble. So, if Texas's offense can get going early against the
Yep.
Vanderbilt defense that is not very good,
Yeah.
then they'll be fine. But I think that Vanderbilt will be able to score.
I think Vanderbilt will definitely be able to score. And I think this loss against Georgia for Texas has had a lot of different columnists and people and my friends starting to look at Texas's schedule a little bit more critically. And when you look at it critically, you realize, okay, they haven't played good offenses, and this Vanderbilt offense could arguably be the second best offense they faced. And it's no joke, right? It put up 30 plus on Alabama. It's put up 30 points, multiple times this season. It was it put up over 28 against Missouri. It's a good offense. It's not the Michigan offense that played this. It's not the Oklahoma offense that doesn't exist. It's not, the Colorado State, and we're past. It's not Mississippi State. It's not the Mississippi State now, right? And so for bringing it to Vanderbilt, they have something going here with this option kind of read pass option look. Diego Pavia has entered conversations around the Heisman. I think that's a bit much, but I do think that he's really solid. He doesn't turn the ball over too much. He's able to get this offense humming with Cedric over at the running back position. And Texas should be a little concerned about it. I think they can handle it, but they should definitely be concerned given what they've been able to do on the ground. That helps Vanderbilt build in the air.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that what they've been able to do on the ground from every position, where Vanderbilt's offense keeps them in games, even with a poor defense, is because they limit time of possession. Vanderbilt right now, 11th in the country in time of possession on offense, which means on the flip side, they're 11th in limiting opponent time of possession. So if you're Texas and you get off to a slow start, you're not going to have as many opportunities as you may have against another team who has a faster offense. Vanderbilt's offensive drives are long. We saw it against Alabama. If you go off the field, if you're, Jalen Miller and you throw a pick and you go off the field, it could be 9 minutes before you're back on the field to take another turn at it. So they keep offenses cold. The defense doesn't do a great job of stopping them at times, but their offense scoring like that, it limits your opportunities. So if you have a slow start like you did against Georgia, like they have in a couple games this season, you could be in for a tough time just getting back. Alabama had a tough start against Vanderbilt by throwing the interception, pick six, and all of that. I don't think that Texas does that because what's limiting Texas is defensive pressure.
Yeah,
and I don't see that coming from Vanderbilt in this game.
Definitely, and I think talking about from the defensive pressure standpoint in Texas, I think the story of the week has kind of been, Quinn Ewers hasn't looked as good the past couple weeks. Two of his career low, I think, in QBR the past 2 weeks. He obviously brought Arch in during the Georgia game. Do you think there's a quarterback controversy here? And if there is, does it show its face in this game?
I don't think so. I don't think there's a quarterback controversy. I think that Quinn Ewers is their guy. I think he was playing poorly. We saw just from such a limited amount of time that Arch Manning was in the game that the intention was always to be Quinn Ewers. So I don't think that he'll be seeing ghosts like he was last week. I think it was just a bad game for Ewers. We saw him take that hiatus, getting back on. There could be some rust to shake off that he didn't get fully out from the week before. I think that they will be fine from a quarterback position.
Yep. I think so.
Yeah.
What were you going to ask me what I think?
I mean, do you think so? I mean, do you think there's opportunity?
I think so. Let me preface. I don't think it's a quarterback controversy. I felt like it was pretty premature for Sarkisian to put in Arch, because now you've kind of put it in people's heads like, okay, do we go with the hot hand? So on one hand, as a head coach, I'm thinking you're playing to win the game. If you feel like putting another quarterback in is going to kind of provide a spark, go for it. I think the downstream effect is that you start to put doubt in your main starter's head, right? Who got you to the playoffs last year. And then you add on top of it, he hasn't looked that good the past couple of weeks. There could be a little controversy here. I think that ultimately he's going to put who he thinks is going to get him to win that game. And all things considered, they've played relatively even competition this year. It's almost like a clean resume. I think Quinn's better, but in a clean resume, they're similar. You wipe out last season. I think there might have been more to that benching than we realize.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think Quinn Ewers is their guy. I think Arch Manning knows that Quinn Ewers is their guy. I think had Georgia been a little bit more offensive minded early in that game too, like, they were having some turnover issues themselves. I think had Georgia had some longer drives at the beginning, it could have given Quinn Ewers some time to like settle. I think he just needed to
Yep,
settle down because
that's
it
it.
just didn't feel like he was in his zone. Here now, if Arch
Yeah.
Manning trots out here against Vanderbilt or something like to start the game, I'll go crazy. But
Right. Well,
I
I
don't.
think Sarkisian did announce that Quinn is
Okay.
definitively the starter this week.
Okay.
It's been kind of a story of topics, but quarterback controversy aside, keys to this game for Texas to win dominantly 18.5, if they're going to win that way, limit the rushing game for Vanderbilt. We talked about that, right? They're averaging 160 yards a game this year. That's top 7 in the SEC. Don't let Diego Pavia build momentum. Don't let Cedric Wilson build momentum. That's going to be the key. I like it's not going to be Vanderbilt's defense locking you up. This is not a great defense. Get on them early for Texas, right? Like, do not let Vanderbilt get a lead. I think you need to get up 14-0. If Vanderbilt gets a glimpse of like, okay, we're only down 10-0, we're at home, I think Pavia magic could start. What do you think are the keys? What do you think about those keys, and what do you think are the keys for Vanderbilt to win this game?
I agree. If we're talking spread, and I don't even want to talk spread because I think the spread is disrespectful to Vanderbilt at this point. But if we're talking spread, Texas, you're going to have to score a lot of points, but you're going to have to stop them because you can't just outscore them without stopping them on offense because they do have a good offense.
Yep.
So you are going to have to get out, start early, fast because of the limited time of possession you're going to have in this game. It's going to be tough to put up that amount of points to cover. I think right now, worry about winning the game. If you're Texas at this point, just because you're coming off of one, don't let the emotion go in. We saw Alabama beat Georgia and then come into this game and lose. Now you're looking to flip the script, lose to Georgia and then beat Vanderbilt. So I think that they have an opportunity. I think Vanderbilt has an opportunity to win this game. And it's interesting how I think that they might do it. And it's in stopping the run from Texas. Wisner's been a good recent surge for Texas in adding a little bit to their game. He was a huge weapon for them against Oklahoma, Miss State, but in Georgia, he couldn't do it. And we saw the offense suffer from being so one-sided.
Yep.
If Georgia can stop them, I'm not saying that Vanderbilt's run defense is anywhere near Georgia's, but if they can stop the run, they can limit some drives, get a couple 3-and-outs because of having to put them in 3rd and long situations. And if that's the case, then you may be able to stay in this one. I still like Texas to win this game, though.
Yeah, I still like Texas in this game, but I think Vanderbilt can play it pretty close. I agree. The 18.5-point spread is extremely disrespectful to this team that has looked really impressive in the SEC. And so, what's your final prediction on the game?
38-23, Texas winning.
Okay, all right. That's a big dog score. I'm going to say 35-30, Texas. So I think it's close.
That's close.
I think it's really close. I think people are going to be clicking on the SEC network for this game.
Yeah.
They do. And I think Vanderbilt needs to get on ESPN and ABC. I want to see that come up the next couple weeks.
They're ranked now. They deserve
That's
to
what I'm
be.
saying. Put some respect on
Vanderbilt's. Put them at 7:30 on ABC.
Right. Give me. I mean, Kentucky's been on the ABC slot before. Put them on ABC.
Missouri coming off a big win against Auburn. Huge thriller there against them last week. Alabama, heartbreaker in Tennessee. The game opened at 13.5 as Alabama favorites, which I thought was already excessive. Alabama now 17.5-point favorites. It almost feels like the winner of this has their playoff hopes in sight. The loser of this game is very well on the brink of elimination. Alabama going on 3 losses, Missouri with 2 at that point should they lose this game. Do you think that is the way this game plays out, where the loser is eliminated from the playoffs?
To call this a playoff elimination game for both teams is disrespectful. Right now, Missouri's only at 1 loss. Bama's at 2. This is an elimination game for Alabama. The reason that is because they're at 2 losses, because of how they've looked the last couple weeks. For Missouri, while they have not looked really any equally impressive, they've been winning games. The expectation for Missouri is not as high, and they have another mulligan to afford in a loss. For Alabama, this is do or die. Because after this week, you got a bye week and you got LSU, but you have to win this game to stay in the race with 3 losses.
Oh, I think it's even bigger than that, staying in the race. I think it's having fans even show up to games if you lose this one. Like if you drop 3 of 4 and, damn near lost to South Carolina, it's some changes are going to have to happen in Alabama. And I think the line represents what people are expecting. In this game, the big question for Alabama is like, can they get back to the fundamentals? You know, they're not running the ball. The Jalen Moore throwing on the run constantly, feet not set, overthrowing receivers. Defense having a couple mistakes. You know, last week, even though they held Tennessee back a little bit, most of that was overthrows from the quarterback.
Yep.
Right now, Alabama's just not playing clean ball. They're, you know, one of the last teams in the country in penalties for. So you mentioned them not playing well to be eliminated from the playoffs. I think you compile all of that, and right now they don't look like a playoff worthy team.
No. Well, and they're number 15 in the nation, right? So, you know, 15 Alabama taking on 21 Missouri, 15, it puts you at 3 spots out of the 12 spots, right? You know, you seed it how you want to seed it. They're on bubble watch. There's a lot of football to go ahead of them. The idea that Alabama's eliminated from the playoffs before November starts seems like a wild dream. A dream for a lot of SEC fans that are not fans of Alabama, probably for Auburn for sure. Auburn fans are dreaming about winning an SEC game, but that's another topic for another preview. But for this game, like bringing it back to the keys for Missouri, you win it. You come back from 2 scores with Brady Cook against Auburn. You've played okay football. I think kind of, you know, for Bama, one thing I think about is, do fans expect them to win like A&M did to prove that they are Bama and Bama's back?
I think 2 scores. I think you have to see 2 scores in this game because right now Missouri doesn't look that strong offensively, which is crazy to say with the receiving core that they have. But you know, they're missing their lead rusher, who's one of the best running backs in the SEC.
Yeah.
I've seen some people online kind of hating on him, but I think that he is a critical piece to this offense, especially when the receivers and Brady Cook aren't connecting. So in this game, you know, you have Marcus Carroll, who is a great running back, the best backup running back yards wise in the SEC.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be too far back in that. But, you know, if you're an Alabama fan, you do need to see them do it pretty handedly given that situation.
Right. And you know, for Missouri, like Brady Cook, super impressive. I talked about it earlier. Let Brady Cook, let my boy Luther spin. You know, what should Missouri be looking to do with Luther Burden to take advantage of this defensive back core that has shown some gaps?
Yeah. I mean, bigger than just the gaps in their play, they have gaps in availability. You know, Keon Saab out for this game. And
out for maybe a couple weeks.
Out for probably a while. Yeah. I mean, playing injured through the last game and going down even harder. There's, you know, other DBs that were limited in the last game, kind of periodically going out. Brady Cook right now, he's not afraid to throw the ball.
Right.
We were wondering that early, you know, taking deep shots. He's thrown 32 balls over 20 yards in the air, only connected on 8 of them. In this game, where Alabama DBs this season have consistently been cooked as far as route running goes, the quarterback hasn't been connecting. Alabama must have, you know, angels in the outfield or something hitting those balls further downfield. But in this one, if you hit your guys, if you hit Luther Burden and Theo Weiss, because they will be open at times, if you can hit them, that's the key to the game. You know, that running back, whatever, if you can do that, then that's what's going to, you know, blow this thing open, because they will be open.
I think so. And when I think about the Missouri game plan, right, last week when I was watching the game, they threw the ball to Luther Burden over 9 times, right? They're gonna put targets on him. They're going to put targets on Theo Weiss. You know, Marcus Carroll, we talked about, Georgia State transfer running back. He is solid. He was a starting running back last year. I think he's starter quality. I think they have just a committee system there. This offense could give Alabama some trouble. It's looked okay this season. You know, we haven't seen a ton of great games from it, you know, since like they beat up on teams like UMass. They beat up on teams like, you know, Buffalo. They put up good points against a Vanderbilt team. And so Vanderbilt's defense is okay. Bama's defense is okay. So I expect this offense to do some damage. The defense is what has not looked as impressive. And they slowed down Auburn last game, but we both know Auburn's strong suit is not offense, right? Peyton Thornton will be putting on a LinkedIn jersey very soon. So that's not that impressive, right? So, you know, when you think about Alabama's offense and the keys in this game, if we haven't touched on it already, you know, what do you think they are given Missouri's defense and where it ranks today in the SEC?
Fundamentals. You know, you out talent Missouri. If both teams were healthy and playing their best, Alabama wins by the spread for sure. Alabama is a better football team than Missouri, just talent-wise around the field. You got a better O-line, run the ball, set your feet, deliver from the pocket. Jalen Moore, I think, is doing too much. let's reel it back in and help him deliver clean passes by, if you're him, just sit in the pocket. Your O-line is doing okay. So deliver passes and run the ball. The running backs have been great. They haven't had enough. So let them do their thing.
Yeah. I agree with that, right? Jalen Milroe right now is still top 3 in the SEC in rushing touchdowns. It seems like it's like a fate memory that he was in the Heisman race. We talked about it a little bit earlier, right? The stats look impressive given the front half of the season, but we're going to need to see more from him this game. We talked about what the keys would be for Missouri. Any final keys before we hit the prediction?
Maybe not a final key. I mentioned for Missouri hitting the big playmakers downfield. As I look to my prediction, running back out, Brady Cook probably not playing at 100% coming, in his hospital return game last week. I don't think right now that Missouri's in a place to deliver on that key for the game. I think the key for the game is hitting Luther Burden and Theo Weiss in stride. I don't see that necessarily happening consistent enough in this game. I think Alabama, I'm going to bet on them every week to make that bounce back game. I think this is the week that they do it at home. So I like Alabama in this one.
You like Alabama in this one? So I like Alabama in this one. I do think it's close. I think they give fans more to be happy to watch. I think they'll leave this game feeling satisfied compared to the South Carolina game. I like Alabama 28-14 in this game.
Ooh, okay. I like Alabama to cover. I like Alabama 37-17. Call me crazy. Someone comment the 1-800-GAMBLE number. Whatever they need to do, because maybe I'm crazy over here thinking that they cover, but it's got to happen at some point. And I think this is the game for Alabama.
You're like Nick Saban on College Game Day, picking the Bama game. I
feel like it, man. I feel like I got to ride with them every time. I mean, I will tell you that they have problems, but I do think that there's some point where it will click because they're due
for a game. The spread kind of neutralizes it, right? The over under neutralizes. So you're calling for a big game. I'm calling for a sizable game. If we're watching this game and it's 10-10 at half, I think some Bama fans might be losing their SHIT watching this game. Yeah,
I'll
definitely
be one of them.
Yeah. All right. So that'll be a fun one. I'm really looking forward to watching it. We'll see what we see, man. The playoff elimination game. You tell us, listeners, do you think this is an elimination game for Bama? You think it's an elimination game for Missouri? Is there enough left on the schedule for either of these teams to recover if they are to lose this game? Let us know, please.
Oklahoma and Ole Miss both coming off of a loss. Oklahoma in a big one to South Carolina, getting kind of smoked early on. Ole Miss, overtime loss to LSU. At this point in the season, Ole Miss really needs to get back on track. We called at the beginning of the year. I thought that they would be undefeated. Now they're here at a noon game as 20-point favorites in this game. What are some of your thoughts when it comes to Ole Miss taking on Oklahoma?
Yeah. A couple of my thoughts when I think about Ole Miss taking on Oklahoma is to, number one, just don't underestimate the opponent in front of you. I think Oklahoma is still a well-coached team. We understand the offensive woes, but this defense is really strong, right? That's been what has been able to keep them in games this season against Tennessee, against in losses and in wins, right? It kept them in the game against Texas early on. So for Ole Miss, when I'm thinking about this game, it's don't underestimate this opponent. Remember the goal for the season: get to the playoffs, get to the conference championship, one game at a time. It's all about the resume. And this game is an opportunity for them to continue to build on their resume and win games they're supposed to win. A spot that we expect a team like this of Ole Miss to be in.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what Ole Miss will see from this Oklahoma team this week. They fired their offensive coordinator last week. They're on the interim, who was a former tight end coach at Ole Miss, now at Oklahoma. Lane Kiffin said that means nothing because he was never in a play calling role, so it doesn't mean anything. But, at Oklahoma, Jackson Arnold's going to start this game, which is very interesting to me. Michael Hawkins, he had opportunities. He was showing something, just could never get it done when he was in the game. Jackson Arnold came in late last week and did okay. So, in this, the Oklahoma team may look different facing Ole Miss than what they were expecting.
Yeah, I guess I think the thing for me was like, you don't really know what to expect if you're Ole Miss, right? Like I feel like this is one of those games I'm throwing away the stats for Oklahoma in some ways because I'm looking at it more, again, it's a hungry team in the SEC, has something to prove. They were lumped in that bucket last week of Big 12 teams that couldn't hang in the SEC with Texas losing. I think that Jackson Arnold, he wants his job back for keeps. So I would imagine he's playing with a chip on his shoulder, trying to show, like, even if they don't win this game, that he can be the leader for this offense going forward. There's not a lot of pieces to roll with him around him, but I think he's going to want to show that he can hang. The challenge is this Ole Miss defense has looked super impressive all season. Outside of their performances against, I would say LSU, they've been able to, and Kentucky, they've looked impressive for the majority of the season with Ole Miss's defense. If they find themselves forcing turnovers again, we could see Michael Hawkins come back in this game. But I know it's been a challenge for Jackson Arnold. That's why he was benched the first time.
Him coming in this game burns his redshirt year, which I think he had talked about taking. So this game would burn that.
That's an interesting wrinkle in today's college football landscape. So
future Big Ten quarterback Jackson Arnold.
Hey, look, I'm just happy these guys want to play football. Still, right? A lot of guys are redshirting, but bringing it back to this preview of this SEC quarterback Jackson Arnold right now, he's gonna have to be their leading rusher, their leading passer for the game for them to have a shot against Ole Miss. I think the spread with being 20 under is interesting. I know you had some stats around that one, so tell us a little more about it.
I do. So looking at it, in every game that Ole Miss has won, they have covered. And in every game that Oklahoma has lost, they have not covered. So assuming that you think, whoever's listening, thinks that Ole Miss is going to win this game, the stats would show that they will cover in any time that they win, and Oklahoma on the other side. So, with that, I think it plays itself up for an Ole Miss big win. I think that they're due for one. They came off of a bye after a loss, which always is huge for momentum. They're 1-2 in conference. They're playing at home. They want their defense to run free at this quarterback who they know is mistake prone and the offense isn't playing well. But it does give them an opportunity in a low risk game to let Jackson Dart work against a good defense.
Yep.
So Oklahoma defense, for whatever it's worth, is playing well. They've just been put in horrible positions by their offense. They were hardly on the field and were already found themselves down 21-0 last week. Yeah. So the defense is not the reason why Oklahoma is struggling, but it could be a good test for Jackson Dart to get going against them.
Definitely. I mean, this Oklahoma defense is a top 7 defense in the SEC. What can this Oklahoma defense do that Kentucky was able to do against Ole Miss a couple weeks back?
Yeah, I think that they limited the big plays. I think that would be the key, limiting anything big. Ole Miss, especially to start the season, was so reliant on big play that if you can limit that and force them to nickel and dime their way down the field, you could find yourself in the backfield at times, here and there, 3rd and longs, bringing some extra blitzing. You mentioned they're a well-coached team. Oklahoma is. There's opportunities for the defense to bring something unique and force a mistake.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I do think that, Henry Parrish and this offense with Jackson Dart will be too much given what the offense has shown us with Oklahoma. I have Ole Miss winning this game pretty convincingly. I would say I think they covered the 20-point spread. I'm going to say 28-7. But I think 28 is a respectable defensive performance from Oklahoma. I think for Ole Miss, they do enough to win the game. A Georgia football-esque win in some ways.
Okay. I think that Ole Miss puts up more points just from the Oklahoma offense, putting them in good scoring position. I like Ole Miss winning 38-13. I think, Oklahoma needs to help Jackson Arnold with the scheme because he doesn't have weapons available to him. Don't ask him to do everything. Give him some easier throws early. Build some confidence. You never know what can break out. But if Ole Miss just plays their game, I think that they cover.
Yeah, and it's a Big Ten tryout for Jackson. You tell us what you think if you're listening, right? Does Jackson Arnold stay in Oklahoma? Burning the red shirt to make the right call. We both have Ole Miss in this game. Jokes aside, I mean, this Ole Miss team is super impressive. Still in the playoff race. Still, a lot of their goals are in front of them. There's a lot of football left. They're going to be playing Georgia in a couple weeks. Oklahoma, we talked about them being broken. Opportunity to show that they're fixed. They can get the upset of the week, I would say, looking at this entire slate of SEC football. Even bigger upset than I would say Vanderbilt over Texas. So a lot to look forward to Boomer Sooner Nation.
Kentucky now off back-to-back losses against Vanderbilt and Florida. playing an Auburn team that hasn't won since week 3. They are winless in the SEC. You know, Kentucky at home, 2.5-point favorites. In your eyes, is there an opportunity for Auburn to get their first SEC win in this game at Kentucky?
I think there's a really big opportunity for them to get their first win in this game. I could see it happening in an ugly fashion. I think the keys for Auburn to get a win in this game is limit the production of Barron Brown. We talk about it every time we talk about Kentucky. I think he broke one of the SEC records for kick returns or returns for touchdowns. This man is incredibly fast. Slow him down. He's going to get the ball. Make sure that you slow down Dime, Sumo, Kambaye, the usual, and just not turn the ball over. I think that's the defense hasn't really been a challenge for them this season. Just don't turn the ball over on the offensive side. Those would be the 3 keys for me when I think about this game for Auburn winning.
Yeah, and up to this point in the year, if you're Auburn offense, turnover issues, all year we've talked, about how good Kentucky's defense is. Every week, I think our voice gets a little bit quieter. Is Kentucky's defense still good? Like, do they have the ability to shut off this Auburn offense?
I think their defense is still good. The games have pointed to there is some cracks in the dam, right? Water is able to get through it, and I think there's more cracks in that dam now than when the season started. You point to the Ole Miss game, you point to the Georgia game. Those kind of feel a little bit far away, given the last football that we've seen from the Kentucky defense. Maybe it's a little bit of this defense just getting tired from the season, the wear and tear. The offense has been serviceable, but when you have the defense in the field this often, you're bound to have some cracks exposed. So is this defense still at championship level? I don't think so right now. Is it a good enough defense to slow down Auburn? I think we'll see, right? Like, if your defense is legit, as we have been saying, as everyone has been saying, this is the game to show it, right? I'll give you a mulligan against Florida because Florida's offense has shown steady improvement. It wasn't a pretty game for them against that offense. And so that's something that I would imagine Auburn would be looking to learn from in this game.
Yeah. Both teams at this point, like, this is a must-win game for – I've seen both coaches at this point kind of making statements that are kind of like, keep my job, taking shots at other teams. Like, it just feels like a little bit out there because, Kentucky at 3 wins right now, Auburn at 2. Both coaches kind of on the hot seat. Whichever team, for either team, Kentucky especially, you have to win this game pretty much to go bowling. Like,
yeah,
this game, if you lose this game, I don't see the path to go bowling for them.
Yep. And I think that's kind of, whenever we talk about what this game means for different teams, I look at, well, what's the goal in front of them, right? So Kentucky's goal, you start the season off, you're in the SEC championship discussion. That's your idea, right? I didn't believe that. That's not what my projections said when the season started, but I did believe they were going to be a 7-8 win team. The season's played out. Some games you should have won, you lost. Some games you should have lost, you won. You beat Ole Miss. This game against Auburn is an opportunity for them, like you said, to get that 4th win. I'm looking at it as more of an opportunity to see if Brock Vandagriff is your guy going forward. He's only a sophomore, junior. Obviously, you have a guy behind him. You have the recruiting. You want to see that he can be the guy to step up and lead you to win games. That's going to be the key to this Mark Stoops-led team being successful going forward. And Auburn is the test in front of you to prove that. For Auburn, it's a game where you just want to put everything together, right? Peyton Thorne didn't play terrible last game. He played fine, right? Condre Lambert-Smith, I always talk about it. What is he going to get? His every time. He's going to get his every time, right? He's second in the SEC in terms of touchdowns. This is an opportunity for him to turn up against a team like Kentucky and show out and show that he's one of those guys. It's a game that I wouldn't want to touch spread-wise. I really don't think what's going to happen because it's like how do you say, okay, Kentucky's a better team, I'm going to pick Kentucky. The last week didn't show that performance, right? How can you say that Auburn is a bad team? It's like, well, they almost beat Oklahoma. They almost beat Missouri. They, all intents and purposes, they dominated that game against Missouri. Missouri just came back at the end. And so,
Yep.
you know, it's a toss up of a game. That's kind of where my head is at with it. Rushing game is somewhat equal. Jarquez Hunter is obviously a better running back. The quarterback play is somewhat equal. Brock Vandagriff on paper is better. I think he makes less mistakes. I don't think he makes a ton of plays though. Defensively, Auburn's defense, I think they don't get as much respect as Kentucky's defense, but I think Auburn's defense is about similar.
Yeah.
Given the last couple games.
I agree. Had the offense at Auburn played well, the Auburn's defense would be getting just considerably more credit because of what they've been able to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, at this point in the season, Kentucky a little bit better against the spread. I think if this game was played in Auburn, I'd be picking Auburn. If I think this, since it's being played in Kentucky, I like Kentucky in this one. What do you think? Who do you have in this one?
Yeah. I think in this one, I'm going War Eagle Nation. Oof. I think Auburn's able to find a way to get a win in this one. I don't think it's pretty. I'm going to say 17-14. I think that's well below the under. That means that Auburn would cover, Kentucky would not cover. I think it's just a ugly, SEC football game in this one. So I like Auburn in this one. War Eagle Nation. Let's see what you got.
All right. I like 23-17 Kentucky.
That just about wraps up today's episode, right? If you like content like this, you like game previews, you like game recaps, you like to hear our wild reactions, celebrations, please hit the subscribe button. It makes it a lot easier for you guys to find our content at the new SEC podcast. It takes 2 clicks. And so thank you for tuning in. Once again, we're excited for another week of college football in the SEC and football around the nation. And until next time.